OM goodness, guys. Today we have a huge treat for you. It is the Begode ET Max, the newest and most powerful EUC ever made. This is a flagship EUC made by Begode, and it is going to be unbelievable. We're going to be discussing the specs of it. We're going to be comparing it to the Commander GT Pro and the Lynx, and we're going to be talking about exactly where you can get it. With this EUC, Begode has started engaging in some shady business practices that we're also going to be discussing around the end of this video. You don't want to miss it. Let's get started. This is Wheel Good time. All right, so we've got the announcement for the ET Max from Begode. I'm not quite sure why they aren't calling it the Extreme Pro, because that originally is what they were going to be calling it. But I'm glad they moved away from calling everything Pro, because frankly, it was just getting old calling everything Pro and thinking that's cool. But that just means that they get to pave the way for the ET Pro Max, which is probably going to be announced in the next few weeks. Let's first discuss the specs on this wheel. It is a 168 volt EUC with 150 or 130 millimeters of suspension travel. The marketing photos on this wheel are a bit contradictory, so we don't quite know if it's 130 or 150 millimeters of suspension travel. So I'll just pop these photos up right now, and we're just gonna scroll through these promo photos and talk about it. The ET Max has a 3,000 watt-hour motor that is basically the same as the GT Pro. This wheel is, in essence, the same as the GT Pro made by Extreme Bull, Begode's sister company, but it looks like it's kind of superior to it in almost every way. Instead of the coil and oil shock type system that the GT Pro has, the ET Max instead is using the tried and true coil shock, but this is a bit of an upgraded shock. This is a coil shock that looks to be an upgrade to their current one in a lot of different ways. Begode is finally listening to their customers and getting a lot better at their suspension. So I have faith in this one. In the marketing photos, they say they have tile-shaped magnets on the motor, which are supposed to increase torque. Now, we don't have a whole lot of details on that, but apparently it is better than what they have been using, so we'll just see how it goes. And just like the GT Pro, the ET Max also has 48 MOSFETs, which is absurd. It's able to handle up to 1,200 amps of continuous power. That is unbelievable. Paired with the 168 volt system, this thing is going to be an absolute powerhouse. To put it in layman's terms, this wheel should never, ever cut out based on overleaning, over-torquing, etc. This wheel is able to handle so much power. Also, the max speed on this wheel is 180 kilometers an hour free spin. That translates to 111.8 miles per hour. Now, of course, we have the caveat of this being free spin speed, not actual riding speed. So that means that this wheel is going to be probably able to sustain, I don't know, 60, 70 miles an hour, give or take. That's pretty much the same as what I was guessing for the GT Pro, and the top speeds are fairly similar. The biggest difference is that with the GT Pro, that one has a C38 motor, which is high torque and high speed, and then the ET Max appears to have a C40 motor, which is going to be higher torque. Therefore, the max speed is going to be a little bit lower. No matter what, this is still going to be way beyond what any person, even the racers, are likely ever going to be touching that top speed, and that's a good thing. As I said in a previous video when I discussed the GT Pro, a very high top speed margin where you're never actually going to be hitting that speed is important for a device that will instantly cut out once you achieve that absolute max speed on it. Something that I really like about this wheel is the fact that the trolley handle is integrated into the seat. The trolley handle flips up and down, very similar to the way that the Commander Pro handle does, and I really like it. I've been begging Begode ever since they released the Master to completely ditch that design, just because the trolley handle on the Master, Master Pro, EX30, Extreme, it's trash. It's just so wobbly and loose that it's just no good. It's very low build quality. This on the ET Max looks very premium. With that particular design, it does seem like it's going to be tough to get a third-party seat on it, but regardless, it looks like it's going to be tall enough that riding seated should never be a problem. It's also very ergonomic looking. The pads are Velcro adjustable, so you can finally adjust the angle of aggressiveness and the angle of lean, something that you've been never really able to do before with any Begode EUCs. It's at best been adjustable up and down, but you've never been able to adjust the angle of aggressiveness. That said, this very well may be the very first EUC that Begode has made where you don't actually have to buy third-party pads before your EUC arrives. You can actually probably use these same pads that come out of the box. This may finally be a turnkey, ready-to-ride EUC, a first for Begode. A couple of things that I did notice is that these pedals are redesigned, they're fully CNC'd, and they have true spikes. This is unlike the type of pedals that say leaperkim or kingsong or even inmotion use, where it's just bumps and they're okay at best. And in general, you have to get yourself some E-Rides pedals which have actual spikes. However, Begode has stuck with the tried and true method of using actual spikes on their pedals, which keep your foot locked in and secure. These ones are upgraded. It looks like they are a bit thicker and a bit higher quality than the previous set of pedals that Begode was using on the EX30 and the Extreme and the Master Pro V2. This one actually looks very, very high quality, and I really like it. Another great thing about the ET Max is that the side panels are completely flat. They have finally eliminated the gap between the two batteries, and your ankles are really going to be thanking you for this one. This has been a minor annoyance for a really long time, especially for the Master Pro, where the wheel is so huge, it's so heavy, and having that big old gap there, it just rubs on your ankles. So finally, they fixed that on the ET Max. Many people are probably thinking this is just a reactionary thing to the Lynx. And that may very well be the case, but this wheel has been under development for quite a while. Begode has in the past engaged in a number of shady business practices, including with the launch of this particular product, but we'll be discussing that later. In this case though, this wheel has been a labor of love that they have been working on and lovingly developing for a very, very long time. 168 volt systems is something that they have been working on since before the Extreme was even announced. The Extreme was going to be a 168 volt EUC, but it wasn't thoroughly tested enough, and they decided that it wasn't quite safe enough to release to the general public. They hadn't thoroughly tested it, believe it or not. Now, there are some real big question marks about this wheel that hopefully we get answered soon. Number one, will that mudguard, which looks pretty narrow and kind of short, will it actually protect you from mud, or are you just going to have to get one 3D printed? Begode's mudguards are historically basically useless, and if you ride in the rain, you can expect a serious case of muddy butt. Another question mark about this wheel is that we don't know the weight on it. I would expect it to be roughly 103 pounds, which is what the GT Pro is going to be weighing. So it's definitely going to be a heavy EUC. On the basis of weight alone, I would not consider this wheel to be ideal for a beginner, but to each his own, and in general, people are moving towards just getting the wheel that they want as opposed to a quote beginner-friendly, smaller type of wheel. It's whether or not it's actually advisable, that's what's being done. However, an ET Max in the hands of a beginner is basically like putting a 15-year-old in the wheel of a Formula One car and then telling them to learn how to do it and then expect them to be a good driver. It's just not really advisable. This is a rather heavy wheel, so I would say this is more of an enthusiast wheel. However, it is going to be a good all-arounder. This wheel is 130 or 150 millimeters of suspension travel, and so this is going to be really good for trails and be incredibly torquey at the same time. Also, because of the larger wheel diameter, this is going to be really good for riding on the street. You can expect to ride safely with traffic as long as the local laws allow it. Another huge question mark is this wheel waterproof? We don't know that. They haven't said anything about it. They're not advertising it. And I've said it so many times before, every EUC in the year 2024 needs to be waterproof. And not just waterproof, but independently certified. So I have to give a huge shout out to Jason at eWheels, who had the Veteran Lynx actually independently IPX6 certified. by an independent agency. I'm really happy about that the Lynx is actually IP certified. And it seems pretty disappointing that Begode is not saying that this wheel is waterproof. So that may be a huge check mark in the Lynx's favor. Now this wheel is going to be offered in two different battery varieties. We have the 50 GB version and the 50S version. Now, the question mark is, we don't know exactly what the battery configuration is in parallel. If this wheel is indeed a 4P or 6P configuration, then you have to get the 50S version. This wheel is extremely high power. And so you have got to get something that is able to handle all that power. The controller is able to handle it, but can the batteries? Only something that is 50S or more powerful should be used in this EUC. The only way that you should be using a 50 GB version of this wheel is if the wheel is in an 8P configuration. And even then, you're unlikely going to be able to access the same amount of power that you would if you got the 50S version. I say this because the Master Pro V3 is offered in 50S, 50E, and 50 GB varieties. But the controller's firmware is designed so that with the 50 GB/50E version of the Master Pro V3, you will not get the same top speed, you won't get the same amount of power as you do with the 50S version. So for that reason, for the ET Max, I absolutely only recommend getting the 50S version. 50S is safer, it lasts longer than 50E and 50 GBs, it's just better in every single metric except for price. 50S is going to be a bit more expensive, but in my opinion, it will absolutely be worth it. Now, speaking of batteries, I would expect this wheel to have about 50 or so miles of real-world usage range. That will obviously vary based on how fast you're riding, how hard you're riding, and of course, the weather variables and the rider weight. So let's discuss some of the shadiness that Begode is engaging in about this wheel. They're also telling dealers that they need to get 50 of these. They need to pre-order 50 units of the ET Max in order to just get access to batch 1. Let's be clear, for the small-time dealers, this is a deal killer. That is a massive risk that these small-time dealers are having to take on, and Begode doesn't seem to care. This is shady and wrong, and I do not approve. Now, speaking of dealers, there's only two that I know of that are getting the batch 1 version of this wheel. We have eWheels and Next Gen Mobility. Now, I know that there are some dealers that are going to be taking on that huge risk of buying 50 of these ET Maxes, but I don't know which ones exactly they are because it's such a huge order that they have to do. The retail price on this wheel is going to be $4,300 US for the 50S version, or for the 50 GB version, you're looking at $4,100. That is pretty equivalent roughly to the Lynx, which is $4,200. Now, if you're looking to get this wheel from Next Gen Mobility, the price tag on this is going to be $3,700 for the 50S version, the only one that I recommend. Or if you choose to buy the 50 GB version, then you're looking at $3,500. Next Gen Mobility also ships worldwide to over 40 different countries and will beat any advertised price, so good on them. And if you want to get a little bit further of a discount and help out the channel directly, you can use the coupon code WheelGoodTime to get yourself an even better price on any wheel. Now, how do we compare this to the Lynx and the GT Pro? Personally, I think that this is better than the GT Pro in almost every conceivable way. It's prettier. Are you taking notes, Extreme Bull? This is way prettier than the GT Pro. And compared to the Lynx, they are both pretty much flagship all-arounder type of wheels. The ET Max is definitely going to be replacing the Master as their flagship device. And of course, it's coming with flagship prices. Now, we don't know the exact weight, but this definitely looks like it's going to be heavier than the Lynx. So the Lynx is going to be lighter weight, it's going to be a little bit more agile, a little bit more nimble, and therefore probably a little bit better as an all-arounder type of wheel. I know that Begode is looking to make this a Lynx Killer because it does outclass it in almost every category in terms of things on paper. But in terms of reality, in terms of the firmware, in terms of the programming, the software design, the actual real world performance and fit and finish, the Lynx very well may beat the ET Max in all of those categories. So what's more important to you? If you thought this video was entertaining, please hit that like button, and just so my self-esteem gets improved, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Make sure you check out the video description where there's tons of discount codes and affiliate links for your next EUC purchase. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.